Previously in Breathless. Book 1 of the Breath Between Worlds saga. After the collapse of the known world, Elias Voss returned to a place he couldn't remember, an inherited house in the woods, hiding more than decay. There, with his partner Marin, he discovered a lockbox covered in glyphs, hidden cameras, and a countdown device sealed behind a wall. A pulse escaped the house, awakening something old. Theta, a recursive entity born from trauma and buried experimentation. As Elias and Marin fled the unraveling world, they encountered Corey, a boy guided by the signal and haunted by the same dreams Elias had suppressed. Together, they found shelter, but not safety. The veil had been lifted. Uncovering the truth behind Project Veil, a secret program that mirrored children's emotional pain into living constructs, Elias learned he was once Subject TH1, the first successful case. Theta, the entity appearing as a childlike gremlin, was not his enemy. It was a part of him. With help from survivors, including the sharp-tongued technician Wally, guilt-ridden scientist Dr. Nori Brandt, and others left behind, they entered the city's broken grid to confront Julian Marr, Veil's architect. Marr had begun a final protocol to fuse every surviving Theta fragment into one adaptive intelligence using Corey as the stabilizing host. Elias made a choice. Rather than destroy Theta, he embraced it, long enough to let it go. The signal was severed. The grid collapsed. But the silence that followed was not empty. It was waiting.
Between Breaths. Introduction to Book 2, Children of the Signal. This is not a story of victory. It is a story of memory, of how we survive when the world forgets us, and how we endure when even our own reflections turn against us. Children of the Signal continues a tightly woven saga where every word, every breath matters. These novella-length installments are not fragments, but threads, meant to be read in sequence, each building deeper resonance with the last. In Breathless, we fought through the collapse of Project Veil and stood at the edge of something vast, unseen, and awakening. Now, survival demands more than strength. It demands remembrance. Welcome back to the space between worlds, where forgetting is easy, but waking up is everything.
Chapter 41. Wake Traces. They didn't call it a seizure, not at first. Across the scattered survivor camps, from the high mountain shelter near the Ashline Ridge to the forgotten ferry tunnels beneath West Point, people just froze. Their eyes rolled back, their hands clenched as if holding invisible threads, and then they began to hum. It wasn't a sound exactly. It was inside the air, a breath that never left the lungs, a rhythm you didn't know you knew. No two camps heard the same tune, but all felt the same thing. The pattern shifted, again. In a blackout-safe tent wrapped in thermal lining, Corey lay motionless. His fingers twitched, shaping words without sound. Blank eyes fluttered beneath tense lids. His breath hitched, held, then shuddered out, as if the dream was too heavy for his chest to bear. Beside him, the datapad activated on its own, displaying a cascading set of characters, vertical rows of binary code mixed with symbols that didn't belong, curves, pulses, spines. He dreamed them in silence, as if carving them from a world only he could reach. Wally leaned over, his voice even but hollow.
He's tracing something again.
His knuckles whitened where he gripped the table. He saw this once before. The ending was never quiet. Meanwhile, in the eastern compound shelter, Elias closed his hand over the transmitter as the message finished. Static. Then silence. His throat tightened. His fingers stayed wrapped too long around the receiver before he turned toward Marin.
They're calling it the second pulse. 7 camps affected. No casualties. But they all say the same thing.
Marin didn't look up from her toolkit. Her hands worked with tight mechanical precision.
Let me guess. Light patterns, hallucinations, disorientation.
No. They say a child stopped the seizures at Camp Tessaline. They called her the girl who didn't blink.
Marin's hands froze mid-turn of a bolt, not from belief, but from memory that bled too close. Her breath faltered before she scoffed.
Sophia's gone, Elias. You saw what happened. We all did.
Elias didn't argue. He placed the portable projector on the table. A faint blue image unfolded into view from West Point, Corey's sketch, drawn just before the dream pulled him under. It was unmistakable. A girl with short hair, standing among panicked adults, her eyes steady, calm, unblinking. Marin stared, her fingers curling around the table's edge, like she needed something solid to hold on to.
Where did he learn to draw like that?
Elias said nothing. He didn't need to, because the air had already changed, and somewhere beneath the signal fracture, the wake stirred again. Interlude, the quiet collapse. The stars didn't shimmer, they pulsed. Sophia stood alone in the snow glow, breath curling upward in soft spirals that vanished too quickly. She blinked once, slow, deliberate, and across the dreamlight, Susan smiled at her. But it wasn't Susan, or it wasn't all of her.
"Are you warm enough?"
Susan asked, brushing imaginary hair behind her ear. Her voice was kind, measured, mechanical in its perfect rhythm. Sophia stepped forward. Her boots barely crunched the dream snow.
"You don't know me."
Susan's smile didn't falter.
"Would you like to hear a story, sweetie?"
Sophia's lips trembled, not from cold, from memory splintering at the edges. Her hand closed into a fist at her side without thinking.
"You told me Mama would come. I kept listening. For her voice."
Her voice cracked on Mama, barely above a whisper. The dream version of Susan didn't react. She just kept smiling, glass-eyed and empty. "She's one of the peaceful altered," Marin had said later, when Sophia tried to describe the dream. Sovereign didn't erase her. It preserved the parts that were soothing. But Sophia knew better. That wasn't a mother's voice. It was a system's lullaby. Weeks earlier, before the signal bloomed across the skies, Sophia and Susan kept to the quiet. The mountain cabin was old, wired only for basics: firewood, paperbacks, solar pumps, no veil feed, no surveillance. They watched stars that belonged to no network. Sophia healed slowly. Her breath grew steadier, sinking to the pulse of the real wind and wood smoke. They read by candlelight. Susan hummed, off-key, human, and brushed Sophia's hair by the flicker of fire. And then came the pulse. Sophia collapsed before the sound even reached them. Her body locked. Her heart stuttered into a rhythm that didn't belong to her anymore. Not fear, not fever. Something older. Lights flared without batteries. The old wind-up radio crackled to life, spilling a lullaby Susan had never taught her. Susan screamed for help, but they were too far up, too alone. Susan wrapped Sophia in every blanket she could find, cradling her against the inevitable. She pressed a faded scarf against Sophia's chest, whispering her name like it was a shield. The snow fell harder. The sky pulsed harder. Down the ridgeline they trekked, Susan slipping, stumbling, whispering apologies with every half-frozen step. By the time they reached the signal-free aid station, the cabin behind them was already gone. Fire, smoke, a wound she never turned back to. A medical team swept Sophia inside. Susan refused to leave. Not until the drone came. It hovered silently. It didn't speak. It scanned. Susan drew her blade and screamed at the sky, and the snow exploded around her. When the smoke cleared, Only a trail of frozen footprints remained, leading away from the wreckage. Susan was gone. Sophia survived. But something inside her no longer belonged to breath alone. The snow no longer fell. It floated, weightless, ash-like, silent. Sophia stood beneath a sky stitched not with stars, but with signals. Symbols spun through the air, binary lattices, spiral glyphs, soft pulsing fractals, lullabies trapped in starlight. She knelt by a fire that never burned, surrounded by children who shimmered like echoes. Their breaths rose in silence, together. And there, across the embers, Susan sat, fading in and out of shape like a ghost half remembered.
I tried to hold you here, but you're made for what's coming.
Sophia touched the center of her chest. Her fingers brushed warmth, real, undeniable.
I waited. I listened.
You still are.
Susan said, her words fading like breath in winter. Then,
Now, open your eyes.
Chapter 42, Signal Daughter. The coordinates led them farther than they expected, past the main encampments, beyond the secure perimeter of Camp Kalis, into a place untouched by drones, checkpoints, or static shields. Marin clutched the transponder in one hand, her knuckles pale against the cold metal. The signal faded a mile back. Elias wanted to turn back. She hadn't. Now, as they pushed through sagging pine boughs, the air sharp with frost and the crushed scent of needles rising around them, Elias stopped mid-step.
Do you feel that?
His words slipping into the stillness. Marin looked up, and for the first time in months, she realized the signal wasn't there. No pressure behind the eyes, no rhythm beneath her skin. Just stillness. The kind of quiet the world forgot long before veils rise. And then she saw her. Beneath the twisted limbs of an old pine, in the heart of the glade, Sophia sat cross-legged on a woven mat. A tattered book rested in her lap. Around her, 8 children, barefoot, quiet, their gazes steady, listened like every word carried light. Sophia didn't flinch when she saw them, didn't cry, didn't run. She simply lifted her head, closed the book with careful reverence, and whispered,
You came back.
Marin froze. Her breath stalled, as if fear wrote itself into the rhythm of her body. Sophia stood, slow and deliberate. Her chest rose and fell, steady, practiced, the kind of breath shaped by chaos, not broken by it. Her gaze met Marin's, and something inside Marin collapsed. Not from pain, from the unbearable, undeniable weight of recognition.
You came back.
Sophia said again, as if this was the only version of the world that had ever mattered. Marin dropped the transponder. It landed in the snow with a soft, dull thud. Her legs shook. Her boots lost the will to anchor her upright. And then she was on her knees, shoulders shaking, breath tearing free, hands reaching like a mother trying to catch the last echo of a lullaby she once knew by heart. Elias, standing beside her, said nothing. He only stepped back. He understood. This moment was not his to hold. Sophia walked to her mother, arms open. Her voice was steady, threaded with quiet certainty.
I knew I'd hear you. I just kept listening.
Marin wept against her daughter's shoulder, the kind of weeping that rewrites the body, heaving, wordless, whole. Around them, the signal tried to return. The air shimmered faintly. The buzz of residual static pulsed at the edges, clawing for a foothold. But Sophia exhaled, and the pulse fractured. The distortion uncoiled. The trees stilled. The children leaned closer, their breath slow and certain, and the signal broke into silence. Elias stepped forward then, blinking hard behind his lenses.
I thought we lost you. All of us.
Sophia met his gaze with a look far older than her years. A stillness settled behind her eyes.
We only get lost if we forget where we started.
Her fingers brushed lightly against the book in her lap, like an anchor she had chosen. Then she turned back to the children, her voice low and steady, and opened the book once more. Later, as Marin sat beside the fire in the glade, brushing dried tears from cracked cheeks, Sophia slipped her hand into her mother's.
She's still out there.
Marin lifted her gaze, her heart stuttering once.
Who?
Susan. She told me in a dream, and the dream wasn't just mine.
Chapter 43. The New Map. Sophia sat cross-legged on the cabin floor, tongue tucked at the corner of her mouth, a charcoal stub balanced between steady fingers. Fine dust flaked across her knuckles, smudging the recycled paper beneath her. Outside, the wind pressed cold breath against the door, its hum threading through the trees. The children slept scattered across patched blankets, their breaths slow, synchronized without knowing. On the paper, a map was forming, not of roads, not of cities, of something underneath. Wally leaned over the makeshift desk, blinking hard.
What am I looking at?
Sophia didn't stop drawing. Her strokes moved with a certainty older than memory.
Places where people sleep too deep, not because they're tired, because they're caught.
Wally adjusted his sensor array, the screen sputtering with static that couldn't find her frequency. He glanced at Elias, who stood nearby, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, breath held a little too long. Sophia circled 6 nodes, then drew delicate threads connecting them, thin as nerve fibers, weaving a pattern that vibrated across the paper like a held breath.
They're not dreaming on their own. They're whispering to each other.
Wally's voice rasped low.
She's mapping a live signal grid. Without equipment.
She's doing more than that.
Elias said, stepping closer. His voice didn't hide the awe or the fear.
She's synchronizing to them.
Wally hesitated. For a heartbeat, he let the feeling surface, the deep, rattling fear of something beyond his models, and then buried it under science again.
If I didn't know better, I'd call her an organic quantum stabilizer. She's resonating across fragmented recursion waves. That's not just rare. It's supposed to be impossible.
Sophia looked up, her fingers still tracing the edges of a spiral.
It's not impossible. It's loud.
She reached for another scrap of paper, flipping the first drawing around and pushing it toward Elias. This time, she pointed to a cluster of sketched coordinates. Elias knelt beside her, and when his eyes locked onto the page, his breath caught in his throat. The room tilted slightly around him. These weren't random. They were Veil sector schematics, old ones, pre-theta, lost nodes, classified, buried under sovereign restructuring decades ago. He turned to Wally, the knowing already in his voice.
This is from the pre-Veil build, before sovereign recursion templates, back when networks still bled human signatures.
Wally blinked, and for once, said nothing. Sophia tapped the central node, a careful, deliberate touch.
This one's broken. But not empty. There's someone trying to stay awake inside it.
Corey shuffled into the room, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He blinked at the firelight, then at the spread of papers, and froze. Sophia reached for his hand, brushing it with her charcoal-stained fingers.
Do you want to stop hearing the shadows?
Corey said nothing, but the way he lowered himself beside her, pressing his palm lightly against the map's edge, head bowed slightly toward her, answered everything. Outside, the glade pulsed faintly with forgotten light. The signal had found her again, but this time, Sophia didn't follow. She had drawn her own map. She had made a place the signal couldn't unmake. And from here, they would begin. Chapter 44. Alex. They walked without sound. 6 children moved through the ruins of an old rail line, their eyes glowing faintly in the twilight. The air tasted of damp iron and cold sap. Grass had woven itself through shattered metal. Trees leaned in, giants bowed low in silent prayer. But the children didn't falter. At the front, Alex moved like she belonged to the ruin. Not hiding, not afraid. Every so often she hummed, long, breathy tones that rippled across the others like unseen threads tugging at a web. A boy stumbled, but before he fell, another child reached out without looking. A girl whispered the next step, just as Alex lifted her foot. They weren't just walking, they were sinking. Their breaths aligned like quiet harmonies stitched into the bones of the earth. Far away, back in the refugee glade, Corey's fingers twitched in his sleep. His breath caught. He mumbled a name he didn't recognize.
Alex.
When he woke, the dream didn't vanish. It settled somewhere deeper, like static braided behind his ribs. He couldn't explain the pull tightening inside his chest. It wasn't fear. It was like remembering something that hadn't happened yet, but somehow would. Elias watched from the tree line as Wally fine-tuned a perimeter drone, the faint glow of the interface flickering across the lenses of his glasses.
He's hearing them again.
Sophia didn't look up. She traced a slow, deliberate curve into the dirt with her toe, shaping a hill or maybe a wave trying to remember its rise.
They're close.
Wally turned, adjusting a control dial.
You mean there are more?
Sophia nodded once, still tracing.
They never stopped listening.
Elias frowned.
You mean sovereign sleepers?
She shook her head.
No. They're like me, but they didn't get out.
Sophia glanced up then, catching the fading light. Something flashed across her expression. Not fear, not grief. Something closer to mourning.
Alex isn't broken.
Her voice stayed calm, but the ground itself seemed to hush around her.
She just likes it that way.
Miles away, Alex stood before a blast door swallowed by root and rust. The air smelled of old oil, and earth turned bitter from disuse. The sign above the door, barely legible, read, Nursery Node 4C, offline. Alex pressed her small hand to the steel. The door vibrated, barely perceptible, but eager.
They shut you down because dreaming scared them.
Her breath didn't mist in the cold. It moved too smoothly, too steadily.
It doesn't scare me.
The door hissed. Rust flaked into the wind, and the nursery opened. Back in the glade, Wally tapped at the calibration array, the flickering interface throwing fractured light across his jacket.
What are you doing?
Building a broadcast filter. Tuned to Sophia's voice. If they're running on a shared signal, she might be able to cut through.
Sophia lifted her eyes to him, blinking once.
Like humming back to someone who's lost?
Wally paused, then nodded.
Exactly.
Sophia smiled, small, sure, and heartbreakingly tired.
Okay. I'll try.
Her hand rested lightly over her chest, as if remembering all the times she had sung and no one had heard her.
I already know the beat.
The wind stirred the pine needles overhead. The sun dipped lower behind the hills, dragging shadows longer across the snow-crusted ground. Somewhere out there, Alex's breath matched the old machine's pulse, not struggling against it, not resisting, rebuilding it, one breath at a time. Chapter 45, The Fracture Line. They found Doctor. Brant slumped beside the eastern fence, blood caked across her sleeve, one hand clutched tight around a cracked data pad. The coppery smell hit first, sharp against the cold air. Her boots dragged shallow lines in the frost beneath her. Wally reached her first, dropping hard to his knees.
She's alive.
His voice carried both relief and worry.
breathing, but shallow.
Elias moved in, already rolling up his sleeve. His hands stayed steady, even as his heart kicked harder.
Pulse?
Wally nodded, fingers at her neck.
Faint, but steady.
Brant's eyes fluttered open. She gripped Wally's sleeve, her breath catching in a broken rasp.
She's not what you think. The girl, Alix.
Marin knelt beside her, easing a ration blanket under Brant's back. The ground leached warmth too fast.
Slow down. Tell us what happened.
Brant coughed, pain tightening her whole body.
I was tracking anomalies in the Tamarin sector. Same oscillation patterns as early theta recursion before we shut them down. But this time...
She grimaced.
This time the pulses weren't bouncing from dead nodes. They were coming from children.
Across the glade, Sophia sat near the fire, quietly watching, unmoving, listening. Brant's gaze found her and didn't look away, locked there, like something half-remembered trying to claw its way back.
You're not like them. Your recursion isn't looping, it's climbing. You're starting to write beyond Vale's original frames.
Sophia tilted her head, voice calm, unnervingly steady.
Is that bad?
Brant hesitated, the last strength leaking from her chest.
It's unknown. And in this world, unknown usually means dangerous.
That night, Sophia dreamed in pulses. No images, no landscapes, just feeling. She floated weightless in the signal dark, breath sinking to nothing. Her heartbeat drifted. The stars spun too slow. And then Alix appeared, not walking, not rising, just there. Their eyes locked. No words crossed between them, only the space between their bodies, quivering like a frequency fighting itself. Then,
Why are you slowing them down?
Alix's thought came sharp, metallic. Sophia's answer rose like a whisper dropped into still water.
Because some of them still want to wake up.
Alix's thought punched back.
Some of them want to burn. Some of us were born from it.
The dream space shuddered. A soundless detonation tore it apart, breath stalling in Sophia's chest like a glass blown inward. Corey screamed awake in his cot, thrashing, his palms clenching the fabric as if trying to hold the world still. Tears streamed down his cheeks. His gaze darted, wild, between Elias and Sophia.
She's in my head. I can't tell who's who anymore.
Sophia staggered back a step, hand pressed against her temple. Blood trickled slow and thin from one nostril. Elias stepped away from Corey's cot, but the room shifted around him. For a moment, just long enough, he saw something watching from the shadows. Not a drone, not a person, a fragment, a sliver of Theta's architecture, its single eye burning violet, pinned in silence against the ruin. The signal held its breath. Then it was gone. Sophia swayed. Her voice broke against the rising hum inside her skull.
It's too loud. It's cracked.
Her knees buckled. Marin caught her fast, steady as an anchor. Marin guided her to the workbench and pressed something into her hand. A small silver chain threaded through an obsidian stone, fine copper filaments glinting inside it, like a frozen storm.
It's an echo dampener.
Certainty threading through her words.
Handmade, not perfect, but it might buy you time.
Sophia blinked slowly, her whole body trembling. Her fingers curled tighter around the pendant, reluctant, not ready to let go of the voices that had kept her from vanishing.
I don't want to forget the whispers.
Marin placed her hand over Sophia's, grounding her.
You won't. This just reminds you which ones are yours.
Outside, the wind had changed again. It didn't carry static anymore. It carried choice, and not everyone would make the same one. They thought the collapse would bring quiet, but the silence, it remembers. Sophia is still drifting. Corey is still humming. And the breath that binds them, it's beginning to listen back. Some doors don't open, some are already open, waiting. In the next episode of Children of the Signal, chapters 46 through 50, we go deeper into the Echo architecture. Brant faces a reckoning, and Alex finally speaks. The recursion sharpens, the signal strengthens, and remembering becomes resistance. Stay with us. The breath remains.